Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some time this afternoon or evening or middle of the day, wherever you are, with us, talking to you about the Gates Foundation open access policy and the VeriXiv preprint server. And we'll just give a couple of minutes for people to join. And whilst we're waiting, I think George is going to launch a poll for us all. Oh, here we go. Perfect timing, George. Thank you. That should have popped up on your screens now, asking if you have posted a preprint before. So we just want to take a little temperature check and see how familiar you all are with preprinting. Pretty split, in fact, exactly split, 50-50 I'm getting at the minute. Okay, shifting a little bit more. Okay, we'll let that cook for a couple of minutes whilst we still have people joining. So give us one more minute and then we will kick off. Oh, it's not really split anymore. Most of you have not posted a preprint before, so it should be new territory to most of you. Still got a few people joining, but I think we can make a start. So I have a few little bits of housekeeping first. You will have noticed upon joining that your video and microphone has been disabled for this session, and that's just because of the large number of registrants that we had. So if you would like to ask a question, please do so, but you should do so in the Q&A box, which should be along the top of your screen. So the chat is disabled. You shouldn't be able to put anything in there, but any questions you have, please pop them in the Q&A box and I will be curating them throughout the session. And we have left plenty of time at the end to address all of your questions. So please pop them in there. The session is being recorded and the recording will be shared afterwards and will be sent to anyone who wasn't able to make it today. So just so you are all aware. Otherwise, welcome. Welcome to the session. This is on the Gates Foundation 2025 Open Access Policy Refresh and also introducing VeriXiv, the preprints server. So we'll have about 20 minutes of presentations from George and Ashley, who I'll introduce in a second. And then we'll hear from our guest contributor, Eva Heinz, about her experience publishing on the platform. And then we should have about 30 to 40 minutes for questions or discussion if everybody sticks to their time slot. So we'll see. I might be a bit of a strict policewoman on that today, so we'll see how we get on. So our first speaker today is Ashley Farley. Ashley is the Senior Officer of Knowledge and Research Services at the Gates Foundation. In this capacity, she leads the Foundation's open access policies implementation and associated initiatives. This includes leading the work of Gates Open Research, a transparent and revolutionary publishing platform. Much of her work advocates for knowledge to be a global good. She completed her Master's in Library and Information Sciences through the University of Washington's Information School. She has a deep passion for open access, believing that freely accessible knowledge has the power to improve and save lives. So that's Ashley. After Ashley, we will hear from George. George Cooper is a Senior Associate Publisher at F1000, the open publishing platform provider for the aforementioned Gates Open Research Publishing Platform and VeriXiv. George has worked in academic publishing for over 10 years, managing and developing publications in health sciences, global development, communication studies, cultural heritage, and anthropology. George has a PhD in information studies from University College London. You only recently defended that as well, didn't you, Lord George, if I remember correctly, right? Just give you a little shout out there.
I've had an email confirming, so this is hot.
Amazing, okay. Sorry, I got totally distracted there. PhD in Information Studies from UCL, having just completed a 6-year project on the censorship of online research journals in China. And then, as I mentioned, we have a guest speaker, Eva Heinz, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow and is working on the evolution of microbial interactions with a key focus on the escalating crisis of antimicrobial resistance and the urgent need for more data from low-income settings to support preventative methods like vaccines and infection prevention and control. Besides being a team leader, she is Deputy Editor-in-Chief at Microbial Genomics, a journal from the Microbiology Society, and is a strong proponent for better research practices, in particular to promote equitable authorship and against parachute research. And she'll be speaking about her experiences publishing with the platform. So without further ado, oh, actually, let's have a quick look at where the poll is. Where did we get to? Stayed pretty consistent from where we were. So about 65% of you have never posted a preprint before. So you're about to get an introduction in what preprinting is and how it aligns with the Gates Open Access Policy refresh. So with that, I will hand over to Ashley.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so next slide, please. I won't spend too much time on the policy changes that we've made. If you're interested in more of a deep dive, we do have a few videos on the YouTube channel for F1000, which includes the Gates Open Research and VeriXiv, where we go into much more detail about the lead up to our policy changes. We've had an open access policy for over a decade now. We changed it once when we joined Plan S, and now, after the last 5 years of the Plan S policy, we've done some research and looked at how the success of our policy, what we're achieving, how much we were spending, all those different elements to really make the decisions that we've made to change our policy moving forward. It's not the perfect end-all be-all of open access policy, but we do think that this vision here is important and something that it will help us get towards a future state where we can really foster a publishing ecosystem that is equitable and inclusive. So we really want to address the inequitable practices in scholarly publishing, namely the inaffordability of article processing charges, or APCs. And that really requires a shift away from prestige and privilege in publishing into one that champions equity and open access above all. And so this is really our guiding vision for the policy changes. We're almost 6 months into the new policy. Next slide. And we've shifted the focus of what we're requiring to be made open access. Open access to the foundation has always meant, of course, the financial barrier to accessing the information, and then also having a CC BY license, a Creative Commons license, to enable reuse to further the impact and build upon the research. And so with those, two components, we focused very much at first on the journal version of record. We've had various successes in making those open access, especially in, I think, an equitable and affordable way. And so now we're moving forward with championing preprints as the main requirement for our open access policy. So if you're, a great poll to see kind of where people are with preprinting, and we know in many disciplines it is still kind of a nascent practice, but this is something that we really hope to change through our policy. But preprints are the early versions of research. They've yet to undergo formal kind of journal peer review, but they allow for early and broad feedback by a much broader community than you get within the journal publishing ecosystem. And what's really one of the things that are really important, especially to the foundation, is kind of speed of access to information. And we saw why that was a need during the COVID pandemic. So sharing of preprints means you can bypass lengthy publishing timelines. And we're able to have our grantees easily post the preprint servers with the CC BY license. And some of the reasons that we think this is really important is it allows researchers to really have full control in sharing their work openly and rapidly and no cost to them. So preprint servers does not cost to publish or to read. It enables researchers to cite upon and build upon information much more quickly. We've seen changes in both funder policies, both for grant reporting, grant proposals, or allowing for post or citing of preprints, which is a really, I think, important shift, especially for early career researchers that might not have the time to wait for formal publication to be able to demonstrate that the work they're doing. And so we're seeing funders change those policies. And I truly believe that they're often the most equitable way for research to be shared. Preprint servers, are journal agnostic. The research can really be evaluated on its own merit and not where it ends up being published. Next. So these are the kind of three pillars of our new open access policy. We've moved the requirement of what version of the article we'd like to see be made open access, posted as a preprint. We just talked about that, and it really ensures that authors kind of retain rights to their work. Since that is something that can happen without cost to author or reader, we saw this as a good opportunity to really think our spend around open access. So we discontinued support for article processing charges, kind of an individual basis. There's a lot of thinking and research behind kind of the inequity and unaffordability of APCs, that even privileged institutions like the Gates Foundation still struggles to keep up with the rising prices. And then that allow us then to be able to rethink our spend. And really, we would like to see that we are, supporting more of the underlying publishing ecosystem itself, not on a per article basis, so that unfunded or underfunded researchers globally are able to publish without facing any of those arduous fees. And we're looking at kind of, what open access models might be successful that haven't been able to really be fostered and take off in the past. And some of you may be aware of kind of the diamond open access model, which has been gaining momentum, where, again, the goal is to subsidize publishing activity where readers or authors do not face any sort of fees. So this is in the very early stages, but yeah, exploring what other kind of open access business models and infrastructure can be supported and scaled up. Next slide, please. Just to cover the top kind of 5 facts of the open access policy change, the open access publications clause has been in all grant agreements since 2015. So all grantees will be affected by that policy update. And as I said earlier, we're about 6 months into the new policy. Compliance is mandatory, but we do really want to take an educational approach to follow up. So giving non-compliant grantees an easy way to upload a version of their manuscript to make it open access, either in Zenodo or PubMed Central. So we have a whole process for that and help grantees. And once that's done, compliance is then considered completed. Always reinforcing that we want grantee authors to retain their copyright when publishing. No article processing charges will be supported for submissions made in 2025. We are still covering submissions that were made to eligible journals in 2024. And then, yes, we are looking at alternative models. But we really think that, one, this is kind of a simpler iteration of the open access policy than it was before. If you post a preprint, you are compliant. We no longer require that the journal version of record be made open access. We do know that that negatively affects fully open access publishers and are thinking through that. But really want the 2025 policy not to impact where and when grantees can publish, simply mandating that there is a preprint version available first. And I think that's it. Yep, I will stop there.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Very timely. Thank you so much. Just a reminder that the Q&A box should be on the top of the Teams panel. It's like a bubble with a question mark in it. So if you have any questions about anything Ashley mentioned or anything that George is about to mention, please do drop your question in there. And with that, I will hand over to George.
Thanks very much, Kelly. And thanks, Ashley, as well, for that recap of the policy from the Gates Foundation. What I'm going to be telling you about for the next part of this webinar is a new preprint platform that we have built in partnership with the Gates Foundation to help you to comply with this new policy, particularly obviously the preprint component of it. So this is VeriXiv, the platform I'll be talking to you about throughout this presentation. Please feel free to have a browse, have a look at it whilst I'm talking. It's been available since August 2024, so in the lead up to the introduction of the Gates Foundation's policy, and it is available, has been available obviously throughout 25 for anyone who is seeking to comply with that policy. It's available currently only to Gates grantees, such as yourselves. So yeah, do have a look. But as I'll be taking you through this presentation, we'll learn a bit more about some of the unique features of this platform. Perhaps most important of all, what distinguishes VeriXiv from, and you can see how it's pronounced, from other preprint servers, is the level of checking, pre-publication checking that preprints undergo, so that there'll be at least 20 compulsory ethics and integrity checks that your preprint will undergo before it is published. If it passes those checks, it will be badged over time as a verified preprint. And I'll come back to what that involves later. In addition to this, all preprints also undergo what we call an open research check to see whether your primary research data has been shared according to FAIR data standards. So is that data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, along with clear descriptions of methods and support to support reproducibility. If a preprint passes those checks, it will be considered an open research preprint, and again, over time, it would be flagged as such, would be badged in that way. So the reason that VeriXiv has been designed like this is to really raise the publication and also the production standards of preprints on a par with a journal article to ensure the credibility of preprinting as a way of contributing to the scholarly record, particularly given now that as a Gates grantee, you'll be required to make that early output available under a CC BY license, just to make sure that those early outputs meet some of the standard expectations of a journal article pre-peer review. The intention here as well is that you'll be investing some time in getting your article, I suppose, journal ready at that early stage. So you'll be investing some time that you would be spending anyway later on in the process before you submit to a journal. So yeah, smoothing that process from preprint to journal submission. So this slide breaks down the process of submitting and publishing your preprint on VeriXiv. For those of you who've ever used Gates Open Research or other F1000 platforms, you'll see it's quite similar to the process we have there. It starts with the publication of your preprint on VeriXiv, followed by optional post-publication review. And then after that, if your article passes peer review, publication in a version of record outlet for now Gates Open Research. So one linked publication venue with VeriXiv. The idea is that you have more choice really at different stages of this process, whether you'd like to progress further or go to a different publisher. In this sense, we're operating what we call a publish, review, curate model. So these three distinct stages, which I'll break down a bit more. So for the publication part, this has three components to it. You can submit your preprint via our single-page submission system with ORCID integration. Then preprint checks will be carried out on the preprint to make sure that the policies that we have been followed. There might be some correspondence with you to address anything that's come out of those checks that needs to be dealt with, any extra bits of information that we need. And then once your preprint passes those checks, a fully typeset version will be prepared and published with a DOI. And over time, badges to signify the checks that have been carried out and have passed. Unlike other preprint servers that might just host a PDF and some basic metadata, all preprints on VeriXiv will be published again to the same standard as a journal, so fully tagged in XML, fully typeset, and indexed in Google Scholar at that stage, just to make that preprint as discoverable as possible. After your preprint's been published, you've then got a choice. You can either leave your unreviewed preprint on VeriXiv and submit your article for publication in a peer-reviewed journal of your choice. Or if you'd like to, you can go down the review route with VeriXiv with the intention of publishing the final version of record post-peer review in Gates Open Research. If you go down that second route, this optional route, then reviewers will be invited by our desk editors and our editorial team, and any reviews that we receive will be published online alongside your article, along with the comments and the decisions, and you'll be invited to respond to those reviews also in the public domain openly, following our open peer review model. You'll then be invited to revise your manuscript if you need to in order to pass peer review. All of those versions will be linked together so you can see, and the public can see how that article is developed over time until it passes peer review. And at the point it passes peer review, then it will be transferred to Gates Open Research, where it will be indexed in the services that Gates Open Research is indexed in, including PubMed and Scopus. So here on this slide, you can see just what that transfer looks like. So this on the left is an article that has been through 3 versions following various rounds of peer review. On the third version, the article passed peer review. So it had one approved decision and then two what we call approved with reservations decisions, which is a bit like accept with minor changes. The author at that stage, it's what we class as past peer review, and then it's been sent over to Gates Open Research as the final version of record. The two are linked together through DOIs that are posted beneath the title, so you can refer back to the review record and the preprint versions on VeriXiv, and you can also refer forwards to the Gates Open Research version of record. Again, you can use those QR codes to have a look at how those appear. So another important feature for VeriXiv and for Gates Open Research is a diversity of article types that these platforms support. The intention is that VeriXiv can be used to disseminate research outputs from all stages in a project's lifecycle, not just your end of grant research articles or methods papers, but also things like study protocols at the beginning of your research project outlining the research to be undertaken, research notes, so individual findings as they emerge can be published as a short article type. Any data that you produce that's been deposited in a repository could be, you could publish an article about that data set, how it's produced, how it could be used and reused and accessed. Likewise, any software or code that you produced as part of your research. All trying to aid, I suppose, transparency throughout the research project, reproducibility as well, avoiding redundancy, particularly with those kind of early outputs about study that's about to be undertaken, so that people know that you're about to do this research and others don't duplicate it, and also ensuring that you're getting a full suite of outputs from your research project. You're kind of maximizing the public good and the public availability of information of that research project. So on this slide, I'd just like to dig into the pre-publication checks that I talked about earlier. All of the checks that we carry out being categorized, and you can see those categories here. To pass the checks to publish your preprint on VeriXiv, you will need to pass the first three categories here. So the authorship, publishing ethics, and research integrity checks, which I'll break down in a moment. In addition to those, your preprint will also be checked according to these open research checks here. All preprints will be subject to those checks, but you don't have to pass them in order to publish on VeriXiv. This is optional to pass the open research checks. To break these down a little bit more, so under authorship, these are, I should say, not comprehensive, this list of checks. There's a few that we've withheld because if we say too much about it, it's a kind of invitation for people to start bad actors to get around them. We might give some hints about how you can do that. But of those that we can share publicly, under authorship, we'll be looking at whether all authors have the right to publish, have grant information that's eligible for the platform, whether you're Gates funded, essentially, whether the author contributions have all been clearly stated, and whether we can verify the identity of the authors that are submitted. Then under publishing ethics, we'll make an assessment of whether a public harm assessment was needed, and if so, whether it's been provided. Ethics oversight, so what was your ethics board approval procedure, and can you provide information about that? For any research that involves human participants, we'll want to check to see whether they can be identified, and also whether you had consent from those individuals and you can provide evidence to support that. Then if it's a clinical trial, we'd like to see a clinical trial ID. Under research integrity, we'll be checking the language of the manuscript to ensure that it's inclusive, that there's nothing in there that is offensive or harmful. We'll be looking to doing a similarity check to ensure that it's not an article, for example, that's been published and peer-reviewed in a journal already. We'll also be looking at whether you provided information about competing interests in your competing interest statement, whether you've sought permission for any copyrighted material that you've reused, and whether there's any traces of you having used generative AI, and whether they've been declared. It's not that you can't in all cases, for example, for language editing, but if you have used generative AI, we expect that to be declared. That needs to be declared as part of the submission. And then under open research, this is where we'll look at, for example, if it's a systematic review, whether you've followed one of the reporting guidelines for that article type, If you have, in the methodology section of your paper, whether the methods are clear enough that someone could follow the steps that you followed and reproduce the research, and then whether you shared in a repository the primary data that you produced as part of your research, and likewise any software and code. At the very least, we would hope that you provide some information about if you did collect data and you're unable to share it for any reason, and there may be legitimate reasons due to confidentiality concerns or legal constraints, that you've just outlined why that is the case in a data availability statement. And if you do that, you would pass that check as well. This slide is to give you a bit of an indication of how this stacks up against some other preprint servers. You may be surprised to know that some preprint servers do actually do some level of preprint checking. What we're doing, which is a bit more extensive, is we're kind of digging into the content of your manuscript and also digging into the background of authors, like using tools to verify author identity, looking at the actual different components of your manuscript to check things like the competing interest section, using an API link to check your grant ID that it's valid, looking at copyright permissions issues and the consent requirements and language as well, and all of the author contributions. And then in addition to that, the open research checks are not something that is standard at the preprint stage. And really, we're giving you that opportunity to highlight the open research credentials really of your project and also of your paper at that very early stage. And the opportunity that you would get an open research badge just to indicate very clearly that the study you've conducted is actually following those more rigorous standards and kind of quite ethically robust research practices, and that the paper could be reproduced, the study could be reproduced. So yeah, on this slide, this is just to give you an indication of how these badges will look over time. We haven't released the badges yet. They're still under development and will be released in the next phase of the platform's development. But we are quite far along with what the designs will look like. So these are still indicative at this stage, but I'd like to share you our latest set of designs just to give you an idea. On the left, you can see a paper where not all of the checks have been carried out. So you can see that if checks haven't been carried out, or if a paper hasn't been peer reviewed, for example, it will be grayed out. If the checks have been carried out and they've passed, they'll be highlighted green in this design. On the right-hand side, you can see a paper that has passed peer review, that's passed the other checks, and you can see some of the icons that we're planning to use to indicate the peer review decisions that have been posted, ranging from green for approved, blue for approved with reservations or accept with minor revisions. Then we have a yellow for major revisions and red for not approved. If you get a not approved decision, it's not that you're rejected, it's just that reviewer feels that there are some quite substantial issues that mean that the article can't progress further and can't be indexed, but you'll still be given the opportunity to address all reviewer comments in your subsequent versions. And then just on this last slide, I'd like to really wrap up and highlight some of the benefits of preprinting in general, but also this model that I just outlined for you as a grantee, Gates grantee. Perhaps one of the most important benefits is it allows you to get your research out into the public domain quickly, whilst it's undergoing peer review as an academic journal, which, as I'm sure you're aware, can take quite some time. It allows, in that intervening time, the research community to build on your work, to cite it earlier in the process, for you to have a great chance of having some impact from your research as well. It allows you to establish priorities so that people know that you're working on this area, that you've managed to get your findings out before anyone else who might be working on a related topic, prevents scooping. It allows you to improve your research as well, we feel, by getting early feedback before peer review. And you can respond to that feedback. You can respond to the comments that people could post and post new versions of your preprint. It gives you a chance to kind of, get that early feedback, perhaps before you submit to a highly selected journal. That could be a way that you could treat this process. You can demonstrate evidence of productivity and research output, which is obviously important for institutional performance reviews, but also your own grant applications as well. For the wider research community, it avoids duplication of research. As I said, by letting people know about work that's ongoing. And although we are trying to get papers out there as quickly as possible, the checks that we've introduced in that badging allows you to demonstrate the rigor and the quality of your work through that process that the preprint will undergo, so that people have confidence that you follow best practice, and that work represents the quality, that output represents the quality of your underlying research. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to this section. I'm going to now hand over to Eva Heinz, who's going to take us through her experience of using VeriXiv.
Yeah, just 1 second, sorry, Eva, before you start, I just wanted to highlight there are a few questions in the Q&A now. You do have the opportunity to upvote those questions that are similar to questions you might have yourself. So just to try to prevent duplicate questions, please do use the upvote function, and then I'll be quiet and hand over to Eva. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. And so, hi everyone. I'm Eva Heinz. So I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow at the moment, and I've got a diverse sort of like invested interest in the publishing landscape. So it was a nice coincidence when I was approached to actually contribute to these seminars. And so I'm also sort of like I've got the hat on, I guess, from the side of the society journal. So I'm deputy editor-in-chief in Microbial Genomics, which is from the Microbiology Society. And recently I've also started as an editor in PLOS Pathogens, which is also kind of like more of an open library, I guess, service group of journals. And I used to work with a more commercial publisher for kind of like my first experiences. And as Ashley, I think, mentioned, and Kelly in the introduction, that I've got a very strong feeling about equitable research and to ensure that authors are being appropriately credited in research. If you want to move on, George, please. Yeah, so this is just shortly, I've got 2 slides, I think, on my background on this. So here you can see on the left-hand side, this was actually the very first paper that went through the new VeriXiv and Gates Open Research platform, which was very exciting also for my student here, who's the first author. It was also their first paper. And obviously, just to kind of like touch on the point, so Wellcome also has a similar platform. So Wellcome Open Research, which works, I think, still slightly differently. I suppose I prefer the VeriXiv version, where you've got it more distinct that VeriXiv is the preprint server, and then when it's actually been reviewed, it goes over to Gates Open Research. Whereas in Wellcome, it's one ongoing process, but a very similar idea to enable free publishing for grantees to share the research. Next, please. Yeah, and this is just, I haven't updated this, and I'm very much in the biology side of things. So my colleagues who are more in the medical could probably also add their nice and shiny Lancet and Lancet infectious disease and so on. But I've been publishing on preprint servers, I think, since 2018, and I've never had any feeling that there was a pushback or that I would get sort of like not taken under review by any sort of journal. Because it was on a preprint server before. So I think maybe that was an initial kind of like concern, but I think that's really flattened out. And as you can do from VeriXiv to go directly to Gates Open Research, you can also, a lot of the preprint servers also offer a kind of like direct submission to other journals, which again, I kind of like think somehow indicates at least, like that they really support that. So I've never had any, like feeling, I think I got rejected from editors just as much as before I started preprinting, or if you want. Next one, please. And that's just a short kind of like summary, I guess. So yeah, we were literally, as I said, sort of like the extremely first one. So there were a couple of teething problems with predominantly just website buttons and so on. But I was really made up with a fast and friendly help from staff, which everyone from you who also has students, for example, as first authors, knows what a difference it makes when the publishing experience is sort of like also a nice experience, and you get responsive answers when there are any kind of like potential issues. And yeah, posted preprints for a really long time. I've never had any issue also with the bright and shiny journals that there was any like lost novelty or so. So I think the papers went exactly where they would have gone without preprints. And yeah, and it's also really easy, sort of like just for like to track your work, published papers when you go, for example, to other preprint servers. they get really easily linked. And again, also with the other preprint source, just like with VeriXiv, I've had very positive experiences. So whenever I send them an email, if an automatic link hasn't worked after publishing, I usually get a response within a day or two. So I think that's a very kind of like positive thing, that these preprint servers are actually also really well looked after, and you don't feel your paper goes into the void basically. Next one, please. And these are just like kind of like shortly, as you know, like as a scientist, and also with, you know, like a couple of feet in different parts of the publishing landscape, I think it really enables you to find the findings faster with everyone. So either, you know, like at an earlier stage, or even just when you submit it to a journal, everybody knows that, you know, like it may or may not take like another, you know, like year until it goes through the whole publishing machinery, which is very frustrating for everyone, I think. It's great for grant, fellowship, job applications, junior staff. No need to wait for this very lengthy, you know, like process and having it on your CV as sort of like in preparation. But you can actually just, you know, like add the link to the preprint server, and you can actually show that the data and, you know, the analysis is there. And yeah, again, like I think kind of like this idea of getting scooped is actually kind of like, I think, the opposite, because it allows papers that are coming out whilst your paper is under review to already cite your work, which they would otherwise not even have seen, sort of. And yeah, sort of like, I think the tricky part is to find reviewers, which, you know, like I know, and I'm sure everybody knows from waiting for papers, is difficult everywhere. But again, if it's already on a preprint server, at least, you know, like people can already see your work even whilst it's sort of like in the, you know, like in the waiting loop. And as a personal kind of like you know, like, and I think Ashley also kind of like made the point from the Gates perspective, where do we want to go our money to? You know, so I come from the society side as well. So I think at least society journals, you know, like you do support, you know, like travel grants for students, or, you know, like better coffee at conferences, or, you know, like Gates and Wellcome Open to really enable equitable access for everyone who has gotten a grant. And, you know, like either science should profit or nobody, in my personal kind of like opinion. And yeah, and I think it's actually twice the excitement, so you don't really lose anything. I think it's actually twice the fun when, you know, first you get it out on the preprint server, which is always a big push to get a paper to that stage, and then, you know, like after the sometimes more or less long peer review process, you get the shiny sort of like end product. So yeah, I've not had any, and yeah, I'm not getting anything for this. I'm not sort of like a Gates employee, so these are just my personal views on this. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And yeah, just to confirm, she was not paid for her attendance today. So just to confirm. Okay, so thank you so much for all the speakers, and we've got a load of really good questions coming in. I think we have one more poll to launch. Is that right, George? So just asking you.
Right, yeah.
Thank you. Just asking whether, after everything that you've heard today about VeriXiv and the new Gates policy, would you use VeriXiv based on what we've presented today? So yes, no, maybe. So please be filling that in the meantime. Okay, let me see what we've got. So we've had a question asking for some timelines from the pre-publication checks until how long it takes to get publication in Gates Open Research.
Ooh. Okay, that's a good question. Thank you very much. What I can tell you is, in terms of getting your paper published on VeriXiv, so that first part. So if you submit to VeriXiv, we'll conduct the preprint checks and we'll confirm the outcome to you within 2 to 4 days. If we accept on VeriXiv, so if there's nothing else that's needed when those checks have been completed, then we will publish the manuscript within a week is the target that we're working towards from acceptance to publication. And then from that point onwards, that's when, if you've selected to go down that preprint, the full peer review route, that's when it will go to go out to peer reviewers, and then we'll start that peer review cycle. So we don't have yet a sort of set turnaround time from the point of triggering that process to transfer to Gates Open Research. We've had a few papers that have gone through it so far, so we've got about at last count 9 that have gone through that process, and of those that have, the sort of window, that the sort of time periods is range from about 2 to 3 months, but sometimes shorter actually for that whole review cycle to complete. Obviously, a lot depends on how quickly authors respond to reviewer comments, and also in the VeriXiv process as well, how quickly you respond to your preprint checks if you are asked to provide more information. So there's a few dependencies there, just based on the availability of time that authors have. But yes, that's the sort of window time frame that we're working trying to work within.
Thank you. And then I think this one is aimed more at Ashley. Is the process the same for manuscripts written from an implementation or intervention funded by the Gates Foundation? And will these protocols have to be approved on VeriXiv? Is that like a funding question, Ashley, or are you?
Yeah. I mean, I can say a few things. But first, VeriXiv is an option for your preprint. Other preprint servers are also an option, so it's not a requirement, but strongly encouraged. And I think this actually also touches on another question I saw. What we look for articles that need to comply with the open access policy is whether or not a Gates grant is cited in the acknowledgement section. So it doesn't necessarily follow the author, but the work itself. So that's what we look at to determine whether or not an article needs to comply with the open access policy. We do have a scope on our website. So usually it's primary research, and then nothing needs to be I think formally approved on anything before publication, at least by the foundation. We don't have any kind of editorial involvement there, even through either of the platforms.
Great,
is that I think
I think so.
helpful?
But the question came in from Comfort Kingsley Randa. So if that's not quite answering your question, please do submit another one and I'll try again. Another question we had was around the linking between VeriXiv and the journal where the version of record ultimately ends up. So if a version of record is eventually published in a non-Gates Open Research journal, will VeriXiv automatically track when this article or version of record rather is published and update the corresponding preprint record in VeriXiv to link to the newly published article?
Yes, it will, but not currently. It does to get between Gates Open Research and VeriXiv, but it's in our development pipeline. It's one of the priority developments to do that, linking up automatically to other version of record venues. So yes, that's where we're going to get to with VeriXiv, but right now we don't have that automated link set up. But as I say, it's one of our priority developments
on our list of things to do. Who would be responsible for following up on the preprint if the beneficiary has outsourced the research work to a consultant?
I think, again, that goes back to we're looking at the acknowledgement section of the article as to whether or not it cites foundation funding, even if it's a contract. Typically, the publication clause is still included.
Okay, great, thank you. And then another question around the different types of content. So does the preprint include all types of research regardless of their size? For example, would a baseline survey conducted in a specific location before project implementation be included?
I mean, I could answer that one from a kind of article type editorial perspective. I think that it sounds like a very short a single survey output could be published maybe as either a research note, which I described earlier. So if you have like a very small set of findings and you want to get a small paper out about those findings that are significant for whatever reason, you could use that article type to shine a spotlight on the findings themselves and maybe your analysis of the survey. If you just want to get the data out from that survey, you could put it in a repository and publish a data note about that. Again, just saying more about how that data set was generated, I suppose the methods you use in your survey to gather that data and where it can be found and potentially being used by others. So there's a couple of options there.
Ashley,
Yeah,
did
and
you want to comment on that?
yeah, I was going to add that was one of the motivations for us launching VeriXiv as well, is we wanted to make sure there was an option for grantees to share any article type that they would like or that fits their work, so that they can easily comply with the policy. So there's definitely flexibility there as to what can be shared.
Thank you. Then we have a question around DOIs. So if the article is submitted to a journal at the same time as submission to VeriXiv, will there ultimately be two different DOIs, and how can we avoid this?
Yeah, okay, so there would be two different DOIs, and I'm not sure that it's necessarily a bad thing so long as the two versions are different. So the version on VeriXiv that you preprint, if you were to then go on and publish a peer-reviewed manuscript elsewhere, would obviously be the pre-peer review version. So you certainly want to have an independent identifier for that article because it's going to be different. And it will be obviously published before that peer-reviewed version of the manuscript. And then obviously when you go through that peer review process, your article will change. There will be changes made to it in response to reviewer comments. And obviously over time, in the sort of short to medium term, we'd like to ensure that there's better link between those two versions, between those two outputs, which we haven't already set up on Gate. We have that already set up on Gates Open Research. But yeah, my feeling really is that there should be two DOIs in that instance. I guess what we want to avoid is different DOIs for the same version of the manuscript.
Yeah, and just to highlight as well, I think this is the same as if you were to drop it on other preprint servers that also give DOIs. That is not unique to VeriXiv. There are many things that are unique to VeriXiv, and that's not one of them. We have had someone asking for more details on the third pillar of the new policy, Ashley, which I believe was about the new sustainable business models.
Yes, happy to share. So one of the first major projects we have of that pillar is we do have a partnership with PLOS, Public Library of Open Science, and all of their journals. We have a grant with them to continue to cover grantee publications. So as a fully open access publisher, we wanted to continue to support. We also have a couple different work pieces in that grant as well. One it'll cover all the waivers for their journal plus global health. So the idea then is to extending that equity. So it's not just Gates funded grantees that are getting benefits from having their publication fees supported, but trying to broaden that as well. And then the more broader project is helping them find an alternative business model that is not reliant on those APCs. So that's a 3-year project that we just kicked off this year. And then the other two kind of models we're following, if you've ever heard of the subscribe to open model, that's one that's very like library institution based with publishers, where basically, publishers set a certain threshold. If they get enough subscriptions to that journal, they can make the next year of content fully open access. It's one of my favorite potential models because a lot of the infrastructure is already there. I think it's, from an admin standpoint, a lot less burdensome and expensive than some of the other models that we've seen. It's been very hard to work with a lot of, especially larger commercial publishers, that their systems aren't really made for supporting open access publishing, to pay those fees or to make transformative agreements. And so it's, I think, a really efficient kind of community-led way of achieving open access. So, if you don't pay into the subscription, then you benefit, and you pay into others that others benefit from. So I think that's a really interesting model that is starting to take off, especially in the humanities and social sciences, which is one discipline where it's been hard for them to realize open access effectively. And then the Diamond Open Access, which is, it's been around for a while, but I think funders, especially in the European space, are really taking it seriously and thinking of how we can scale that up. Because there's been a lot of discussion over many years that there's definitely like enough money in the system, but how do we make it flow in a different way that benefits researchers more?
Great, thank you. I have an interesting question here, which I'm going to pass to Eva. How does this new preprint model on VeriXiv differ from a bioarchive? I thought you could speak to that from an author perspective, given that you had preprinted there as well.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks. So I think, I mean, like the basic principle is very similar, right? Like as kind of like you've seen in George's overview, there are additional checks which are implemented into VeriXiv. And I'd say the final product looks a bit more like an article already, whereas with like bioarchive, medarchive, it's maybe left more to like yourself if you like how you format the publication. So my understanding, I mean, like also medarchive does check, for example, the ethics quite strenuously. And bioarchive also undergoes a basic check that like it is research and nothing like of all the things like you could think of that like I don't know, political something like agendas of so that it's actually research. So I think in VeriXiv it might maybe take like a day or three longer to come up because like you might have to follow up on some formatting requirements or so. But I think it's kind of like a bit more of an effort, I think, to make it look more like a paper and obviously also have kind of like more quality assurances in it. But at face value, I think it will work very similarly. And what was also mentioned with like the DOI, I'm sure VeriXiv will also in bioarchive you usually then get a label now published in wherever, so that they are kind of like at least in some form sort of like linked, and you can find your papers again. Thank you.
Great, thank you. You had a lot of the things that I had on my list, but George or Ashley, I don't know if you have anything to add to that one.
That's a lot of the really most important distinctions. And I think just to really follow up on that point about the higher production and publication standard, I guess we want preprints on VeriXiv to stand as a research output in their own right whilst you're awaiting for peer review and to be discovered. We don't want them to be hidden in a kind of repository or a sort of endless feed of preprints. And I think, so those extra publication standards allow it to be more easily found and discovered. And obviously we index in Google Scholar and so on. It's just really giving that opportunity to really showcase those early findings and that early output whilst ensuring that a higher standard of ethics checks have been conducted so that it is something that can be properly disseminated and have some real world use and impact and application whilst your article is awaiting peer review in a journal.
And then we had go for it. Actually,
just quickly from the funder's perspective, I know this is not like exciting, but it's a very important component if you're talking about metadata and tracking of research outputs. VeriXiv and Gates Open Research are already integrated into our grants management system, so we're able to more easily verify and collect that information. Otherwise, it's been a really hard effort, and then there are a lot of great projects trying to solve for this. But tracking of metadata and having funder metadata provided in the whole research ecosystem has been lacking.
And we had a kind of related question. How can you prove the scientific quality of the articles published as a preprint?
Well, I mean, there's quite a few components to that, I think. And I think what we would probably say from the preprint publisher perspective is obviously the checks are set up to weed out clear cases of misconduct, obviously to ensure that the article is a scientific article, that it's appropriate for the article type. We've got very well trained desk editors with research backgrounds who are going to be screening preprints according to those criteria to ensure it is a legitimate scholarly or scientific output. Obviously, on top of that, we kind of want people to go down the peer review route. We certainly don't want preprints to replace or preprinting to replace peer review. It's not, these two things aren't mutually exclusive. And I think at that stage, that's when some real scrutiny comes in terms of the scientific merit, I suppose, of the work that's being published. What we're trying to do is establish that the work meets the minimum standards of it's scientifically sound and it's also legitimate and there are no ethics concerns. So the checks that we've outlined earlier, same to doing that. But also those open research checks are really important because that's when we're really inviting authors and quite strongly encouraging them to open up their methodology, their data, and their reporting process to wider scrutiny. And obviously, we have that commenting function right from the beginning. So if people want to engage in more of a debate about, again, the scientific rigor or value of an output, they can do that. We're just making sure that it is something that is ethically and robust before it's out there in the public domain.
Great, thanks.
And
go for it, Ashley.
Sorry, because could I add a little bit to that? Because
Yeah.
I know I have a bit more of a radical view in all of this. We looked at when we were thinking about how to evolve the policy, how do preprints fit into it. There was a real hesitancy for many years. I think a lot of that shifted during the COVID pandemic when we saw the need for information to be shared much more quickly. There's been some research that's been very interesting around, how does an article really change from preprint to, final journal publication. We'll be doing some research projects ourselves and looking at our content and how to, the differences between the preprints versus the final version of record. And I think we'll be able to learn a lot from that. But the early research is showing, I think, that there could be a high confidence in preprint sharing. And then I always, try to shift the discussion a bit too. And I feel like we do place way too much trust in the current peer review process without, a lot of evidence of how, how is that actually protecting quality? And if you follow things like Retraction Watch or, anything that a lot of the, literature is constantly shifting, and without, I think, the availability of underlying data, it's really hard as a scientist and researcher to really trust and interrogate that work. So I think there's kind of both sides of the discussion of, should are preprints adding to mis and disinformation, or also, what is the effectiveness of the current peer review system, which is under some strain and stress. And I will stop there.
Thanks very much. A couple of quick ones to finish. Should people be submitting to VeriXiv and to peer-reviewed journals simultaneously, or should they wait for the preprint to be posted first?
You have a choice, really, and there are, I guess, advantages, disadvantages to doing it either way. So in terms of submitting to VeriXiv first before you submit to your journal, you have the advantage of getting some early feedback, and also ensuring that your manuscript isn't going to fall foul of some of the checks that you're likely to face at your target journal, which, if it's an overloaded journal that has lots and lots of submissions, you could wait a while till you get that kind of feedback, whereas you get it from us in 2 to 4 days, whether your article passes those checks. So it can be a good early screening process for you to trial, run your manuscript through, as well as getting that preprint out there. But at the same time, you may be facing deadlines where you need to get a peer-reviewed output out there quickly, and you want to go for your target's journal straight away. That's completely fine. You can do that. And actually, we have cases where articles have already been submitted to a journal, but it hasn't been subject to peer review yet, and it certainly hasn't been published at peer review stage. That would still be eligible. You could still preprint at that stage as well with us. So a few options there. It comes down to kind of timeliness and whether you want to get that initial feedback before you submit.
And from a policy perspective, we do not have any real set timelines, and it's really up to the authors. If we do notice that, there isn't a preprint, but a final paywalled publication, we will follow up with noncompliance. At that point, we'll request sharing of the author accepted manuscript to reach compliance.
Great, thank you. And someone is asking, if a grantee submits to VeriXiv for a preprint, does it automatically move to Gates Open Research if it passes all the checks, thereby preventing someone from submitting to another journal? Or is there an option to just deposit on VeriXiv at the preprint stage?
So we treat it always that you are just depositing on VeriXiv until the point that your preprint is published, and then you're presented with a very clear choice. Do you want to go down the peer review route of VeriXiv with the intention of publishing your version of record on Gates Open Research, or do you just want to leave it as a preprint on VeriXiv? There's no, it's not mandatory to go down that Gates Open Research route. We're not going to do it without your express permission. Either at the point of submission or publication, you will be presented with, as I say, a very clear choice, and you can do with your manuscript whatever you like.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we've got 1 minute left, so I just wanted to have a little look where we're at with the poll. And so as a reminder, the poll was, would you use VeriXiv based on what we've presented today? So 64% of you said yes, nobody said no, and 36% of you said maybe. So we still have a little bit of convincing to do for some people, but no one was quite brave enough to tell us that they didn't want to use it. So that's quite good. Okay, so a couple of closing comments. As I mentioned at the beginning, this session has been recorded and the recording will be circulated to all registered attendees. There were a couple of requests for some links in the chat. I'll make sure that they're included in the email that gets sent out to you all as well. This will also go up on the F1000 YouTube, as Ashley already mentioned, so feel free to share with anybody who missed it. If you are one of those 64 people that said you would use VeriXiv based on what we presented today, or 64% of people rather, please do get in touch with us if you'd like to discuss submitting to VeriXiv. George has had his QR code on the screen here, so please scan that to book a call with him and discuss your specific preprint submission, or just drop him an email on the email that's displayed on the screen as well. And that's it really from us, I think. So thank you so much to George, Ashley and Eva for coming and speaking to us today from your various perspectives. I hope that was really helpful. There were a few questions that we didn't have time to get to, and we'll put them all together and put a blog up on, I think, Gates Open Research is where we're planning to put that ultimately, isn't it, from all the webinars that we've done. So please keep an eye out for that. And otherwise, we hope to see you soon as a submitting author for VeriXiv.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much,
Thanks for your
everyone. Have a
questions.
lovely weekend when it arrives.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.